Chris Impellitteri, welcome to 69 Faces of Rock. How are you doing today?
Doing well, Mark. It's very early in the morning, so if anybody sees the sunglasses, I apologize. It's better than the red eyes.
Oh, lifestyle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, First of all, congratulations on your brand new album, right? War Machine. Uh,
That's the first time I've seen that, Mark.
I just printed it out. I don't think it's officially out yet, so that's how it looks. There you go. You can look at your own album cover. Um, Tell me how you got ready to write and record War Machine.
Well, I play my guitar every day. I'm obsessed with the guitar. And so often when I'm just, playing scales and working on muscle memory and technique, I stumble onto really cool riffs by accident. And so this happens on a daily basis. So to be honest, this record has been ongoing for, I'd probably say about a year before the pandemic, right? And so I think what happened is we did some Asian dates, right? We had played some headline shows, some stadium stuff, I think, out in Asia. And when we came back, I did what I normally do, just started playing. And so I guess to answer your question, it's probably about 5 years ago, little seeds were starting to evolve for this record. But the music you hear is actually brand new. It's fresh. It's just the riffs and the ideas started slowly coming to me. And eventually these songs got built. So that was
Okay.
probably a horrible answer for your question.
Oh, it makes sense. I mean, what else to say? You told me exactly what happened, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, as you were recording this album, which aspect of it stood out to you?
Each record is like, it's like a new child, right? Each one to me is special. And so on this record, what stood out, I think the chemistry of the band. This record was really the input of four individuals coming together. It wasn't driven by me. It was not, I hate I don't want to ever be like a solo artist. So I really think what was unique about this is there was like 25% contribution from four musicians making this record together. That stood out because you can hear the strength of each individual player on this record.
Oh, definitely. And as always, as you just mentioned, you have an interesting lineup that joined you in the studio. So could you introduce who it was that played with you on this album?
Well, look, the core of the band has always been myself, the singer Rob Rock, and the bassist James Pulley, right? I mean, James has been with us since 1990. So we started the band in 1985 or 1986, somewhere around there. So we've always been like the nucleus of the core. But obviously, as many people know, the unique contribution in addition to this record was Paul Bostoff, who's an amazing drummer. A lot of people know him from being like this thrash type drummer. What people don't realize is he can play really well, technically speaking, right? And he can also not only can he play technically, like, do all the really fast stuff, really fast, intricate rudiments, um, crazy drum fills. If we want to go on an odd time signature, I'm sure he could do that. But what stood out is the way he can also play like John Bonham of Led Zeppelin, which thrash drummers generally can't do, right? They just don't have the feel for it. They have the technique for the fast, blast beats and all that stuff, but they don't have the ability to, you know, create this groove or this pocket, even though you can be playing quite quickly. So Paul Bostoff did the record with us, and I think he made a huge impact on it. The record feels a bit heavier with him.
Does. I have an interesting story about Paul because I got to know Paul back in 1989 when he was drumming for a band called Forbidden. And
Mm,
their first tour,
yeah.
he was touring with a cast. I mean, she was a one-handed drummer, literally. So I
Wow.
think that experience really sent him in a different direction as far as drumming goes because he was just on fire and still is.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Um, Getting back to your record, the album is promoted by a new single, Out of My Mind, heavy metal. What feedback are you getting so far?
Shockingly, the majority have been amazing. Um, I've heard everything from this is the best record we've ever done. You know, it's we've somehow brought back, you know, classic metal. I've heard a million different comments. I don't know what's true or not, but I can tell you the response to Out of My Mind heavy metal is euphoric. People seem to be very excited about it. And, you know, to be honest, I think it's because the song really celebrates the fun and the enjoyment of heavy metal. It really is. I mean, it's not lyrically, it's not complex, and it's not meant to be. You know, it's almost like the lyric talks about going to a great heavy metal concert and that euphoria and that experience we all share in unity, especially now, and the band comes on. So, you know, it celebrates that. And I think it seems to be resonating with people. It's not too angry, you know, it's got a great vocal, great melody, which is, you know, if you like the old stuff, like I guess our parents' generation would be like, if you like Deep Purple, bands like that, you know.
Absolutely. Like you said, it's an explosive track, and the use of words heavy metal is not coincidental here. Um, what is the meaning of heavy metal to you?
Well, I feel like sometimes I feel heavy metal has been hijacked, right? To me, when I think of heavy metal, right, I think of the original bands like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, right? To be honest, Black Sabbath I always thought was much more of a heavy kind of rock groove jazz kind of, I mean, not technically jazz, but you know, kind of in that genre. And I always consider them more of a hard rock edge, even though people give them credit for being the first heavy metal band. For me, my age and my generation, I think the bands we thought of as heavy metal really were Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, you know, bands like that.
That makes sense. I mean, I lived through that time. So I can relate. You were always known for your great.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still find yourself discovering new aspects of guitar playing at this point?
Yes. Remember, when I play guitar, the guitar to me is my tool to express myself emotionally. You know, when I was a child, I'd lost my mother and father when I was 9 years old, and because I was an orphan, I had a really lovely woman who my grandmother, encouraged me to learn an instrument, and so she bought me a guitar and, you know, encouraged me to take lessons, which I did. And soon I realized I could express my anger, frustration, happiness, joy, sadness, whatever, through this instrument. And so when I play the guitar, every day I learn something, or I'm able to express a new emotion I didn't even know I had. So, but you know, the guitar is, for me, I'm always evolving. You know, that's the beautiful thing about this instrument. You've never mastered it. There's always something you can do to improve. And that's me. I mean, I practice every day and I love playing guitar.
Sense. What after this new album?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Can you say it again, please?
Hopes do you
I didn't hear. What hopes do I have for this record or this album? Well, I hope the album, first of all, has the ability to reach new audiences. You know, I mean, first of all, we have a very strong fan base around the world, and we're very fortunate. And this music already, from what we're hearing, is really resonating in a positive way with all of those fans. But I also hope that this music is embraced by people that would not have otherwise listened to us in the past. You know, there's a lot of people in the heavy metal community who don't know about Impellitteri. You know, they think we're probably some biological disease just by the name, you know. So, you know, I'm hoping that this strikes a chord. And you know, the other thing too is I hope media, you know, will be more open, right, to the band and embrace us, because a lot of times, you know, to be honest, we get a lot of people telling us media ignores us, and it's okay if they do. I mean, yeah, I would never force anybody to like us or you know, promote us, but you know, there are times where we do see a lot of our peers. I mean, I've had some of the biggest heavy metal bands in the world contact me, go, man, why we love you guys? Why aren't you guys more famous? And blah blah blah. So, I hope this record um, is kind of embraced, right, by the heavy metal community, including all of the media people. That would be cool.
That would definitely be cool. And hopefully you can get some more action on the American market as far as playing tours and being present, visible.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We have, I mean, look, I live here in California. And so we have a lot of people that really like the band. We've every time we play shows, right, in America, when we do, they're always sold out and they're packed, so we know we have a fan base. The challenge is trying to get the promoters to allow us to do venues similar to like what we do in places like Japan, because there we can do arenas. Sometimes we're doing stadiums, and I mean that humbly. And I don't expect to do stadiums in America. That's Taylor Swift. But it would be great to get, the band to do a full tour where we can do like large theaters. That would be great.
That would absolutely be lovely. Also, recently there was another release, Impellitteri, the Complete Beast, which combines all of 1987 to 2009. So you're looking at 22 years of your life. How does that feel to have so much passion, blood, sweat, and tears packed into one single box like that?
You frame that really well. I like that. That's kind of a great question and a statement. For me, it's very rewarding to still be able to make records and tour, especially in specific countries, and have so many people support our band and allow us to share our music with you, or the listener. And so when I see that, it makes me think, man, there's a lot of history there of the band, a couple different lineups. There are hopes and dreams and people's blood, sweat, and tears put into those records, and some of those songs, especially from those records, have really stood the test of time. It's funny when we play songs like Stand in Line live. Like I remember we were playing in Spain a few years ago, and it was, I think, Iron Maiden were headlining, and we were pretty close to the top of the billing. And I remember as soon as we kicked into Stand in Line, the song, I remember 30,000 hands were just pumping, fist pumping, jumping up and down. It was just euphoric. It was amazing. And so, but when I see that, where you go 22 years plus, right, of all those songs, I also think about how some of those songs have touched other people's lives in a positive way, where it meant something to them. It was part of their history.
Absolutely. I wanted to examine the contents of that box. I'm going to show you some images, and whatever comes to your mind, feel free to share. Now, obviously, this got the ball rolling. I still remember Guitar magazine, and I think it was only a cassette at that time, right?
I think we actually had a vinyl release and a cassette, I believe. We basically did that ourselves. We had basically saved up as much money as we could. We were pretty poor. We didn't have a lot of money, but we basically saved our money. We went into Baby O recording studios in Hollywood, California. I'll never forget it because we were in one room and Gene Simmons of Kiss was in the other. And, he came over eventually and said hello to us. And it was wild because that was like going to be the birth of Impellitteri. And so, when I see that thing, I think, man, that Black EP, especially with songs like Lost in the Rain, it gave us a lot of credibility in places like Japan. I remember there was a magazine in England called Kerrang magazine, and Kerrang magazine promoted us and gave us like 5 stars and all that stuff. And that record really resonated with the heavy metal community, right? And it kind of launched the band. So when I see that, the Gothic letters and all of that, it reminds me of kind of like that was our springboard of, launch, like the rockets taking off for space,
And here we have the rocket taken off for good.
Yeah. That's That's a lot of memory there. Yeah. Now, what is the question? Is there a question on Stand in Line?
Share whatever you remember from that time frame. How was even this lineup put together? Because it's an interesting
Sure. Okay.
character.
Okay. Good question. Good question. Um, so after we finished recording the Impellitteri Black EP, we had a lot of press. We had a lot of people covering us. Guitar magazines were covering me. The heavy metal magazines were covering the band, right? We were like, at least for 15 minutes, we were like the new band that everybody was talking about. And we started getting a lot of interest. And then Rob Rock, our singer, decided he wanted to go pursue another direction of music, and he left the band. And I was like devastated. I was like, what are we going to do? We have all these people calling us the tour and all that. So I remember after about a month, I was depressed and I ran into Graham Bonnet. And Graham Bonnet, for people that don't know, he was a legendary singer. I mean, he was a singer of a band called Rainbow. He had played with the Michael Schenker group, and Alcatraz. And Graham and I were friends. And so our paths crossed. And I remember he was like, "Hey, how you doing?" I went, "Yeah, I'm kind of bummed." And it's like, my singer quit. And he was like, "Oh, he was bummed too because Alcatraz had disbanded." And we started talking. I said, "Hey, I just got a record deal and I don't have a singer." And he's like, within probably a couple minutes of conversation, he joined the band. And the next thing I knew, I'm out in a place called Calabasas, California, at Graham's house, and we're writing. And as a matter of fact, the first song we wrote was Stand in Line, you know? So I remember that was a really interesting time, because I grew up. I mean, Graham was much older than me, but I grew up as a big fan of him. I loved his voice. I loved what he had done with Rainbow and Michael Schenker and all those great artists. So it was fun. I was also very young. I remember I don't remember if I was 21 or 22 when I was making that record. So anyways, when Graham and I started writing, the record company decided, hey, we want to put a band around you. So we started bringing in musicians. We auditioned a lot of people. And I believe it was Chuck Wright, who was a bass player at that time. He had played with Quiet Riot. They had, although it was my friend Rudy Sarzo that ended up doing the majority of the record, but Chuck had done the first pass of it, and then and so he hooked up with us, and I remember he was an amazing bass player, right? We needed a drummer. And so we started looking around at all these different drummers. I remember looking at Matt Sorum, who played in Guns N' Roses. There were a lot of drummers we were talking with. But then this guy, Pat Torpey, was introduced by Chuck. And so we went into a rehearsal studio called Mates Rehearsal in Los Angeles, California. And I remember we all three of us, it was Chuck, myself, and Pat, we started playing. And Pat was phenomenal. He could play technically. He was very advanced as a technical player, but same thing. He could play this amazing groove and pocket. And so we basically hired him, and then we brought in a keyboard player who was fantastic named Phil Wolf. And Phil had been playing with Rudy Sarzo in another band. So it was kind of put together with the label and the help of like Chuck, I believe. So that was kind of the evolution of it. And then I can tell you, when we did Stand in Line, the record, it kind of exploded in places like Japan, where all of a sudden we went over there and we're playing arenas. As a matter of fact, the first show we played in Japan was actually the Tokyo Dome, which was, I think the audience was 65,000 people. So it was crazy. And then of course MTV started playing our music video. So those are and I know in the final, so it was kind of like the end of that whole run. I remember we did a concert up near San Francisco, California. It was actually San Jose Civic Center, and it was Impellitteri, and it was with the Pat Travers band. And I remember it sold out. I think it was like 4,000 people, and it was just an amazing show. And I remember we were coming off stage, and I don't know if Pat would remember this, but Pat said to me something like, he said something like he didn't know how he was going to follow that. And he's a great player and great musician. So that's kind of my memory of Stand in Line.
Yeah, funny you should say. Whenever I see Graham Bonnet band playing live, he always includes that song in his set. So that tells you that you struck gold there for sure.
Well, I think that song is one of the best performances that Graham has ever done. Graham is an amazing singer and he's done amazing work, but there's something very magical about his performance on Stand in Line. And he wrote all of those vocal melodies and, the lyrics. That's all done by Graham.
Makes sense. Moving on to Green and Bear. What comes to mind here?
Well, the band went sideways. We kind of lost our direction. With Grin and Bear It, we were being influenced, I think, by other bands. Obviously Guns N' Roses at that time was really big. There was a band called Extreme, which were kind of doing more like almost like funk kind of rock, which really resonated. I really like that. And so when we did Grin and Bear It, we wanted to do something that might show we were growing as musicians and able to be well-rounded as artists. So instead of just playing speed metal or do all the technical shredding stuff, we wanted to show that we could also do stuff that had a really good feel and a groove, right? So I remember we recorded that record. I know what it was. I had bought a recording studio and it was in Los Angeles, California. And I remember we assembled a studio. It was the same thing. It was Rob Rock had rejoined the band. And at that point, Chuck and Pat were off. Pat had joined a band, Mr. Big, and Chuck Wright had gone on to a band, I think, called House of Lords. So it was the same problem. We had to find a new band. And so I remember calling Chuck, and he was kind enough to come back in and do the session. And he brought in a drummer named Ken Mary. And Ken was great. He had played with Alice Cooper and a lot of different bands. So we went into the studio, and instead of just continuing on with like the speed type metal, or the operatic metal or the techno stuff, we said let's deviate and do something a little bit more Guns N' Roses or extreme type rock. And so we deviated, and we brought in our bass player who's still with us today, which was James Pulley. And I'm sorry, actually, James didn't play on the record. It was actually Chuck, but this is where James joins the band. And that was it. And so we spent probably about 3 months writing that record, playing, rehearsing as a band, trying to get a feel, trying to create a groove and still keep the music heavy. And I remember we got some really great songs out of that record. One song that I still love playing live today, there's a song called Power of Love. Not the Huey Lewis song, but it's called Power of Love, and it resonates really well with our fan base. It's got this magical, majestic riff, great lyric, great vocal, the solo shredding, a lot of fun. So yeah, that's what I remember about Grin and Bear. Oh, and I can tell you though, if you want the truth, in Japan, it bombed. In Japan, our market, they love the Black Impellitteri EP and they love Stand in Line. And when we did Grin and Bear It, they didn't get the record at all.
Funny thing, I remember one time talking to Glenn Hughes, who also had a different kind of record, and it sort of bombed in Japan too. And the record label told him that Japanese fans don't understand what Glenn Hughes mean. One of those deals. You know what I'm talking about. Well, you followed that up with Answer to the Master, which is definitely an Impellitteri record.
Thank you. Actually, truthfully, there was one right before it. Right before we do Answer to the Master, we did I think it was a 4 or 5 song EP called Victim of the System.
That's right.
And Victim of the System, there's something interesting about that record. That Victim of the System actually saved our career, because you have to understand, when the 80s ended, right, rock and heavy metal was in big trouble. right? Because at this time, probably around 1988 or 89, all of a sudden the music tastes were changing. MTV was starting to become less favorable towards that type music. Now, we were always a band that was probably much more in between Deep Purple, Iron Maiden, and Metallica or something versus being like in a Poison, right? We were never one of those hair bands. But when Grin and Bear It, you know, when we signed the record deal with our now label JVC Victor, they wanted another kind of Impellitteri Black EP or Stand in Line. And when we delivered Grin and Bear It, we almost lost our record deal. So the label said, we're going to give you one chance. And we want you to go back in and do an authentic Impellitteri record. That Chris, we want you to do all the technical shredding guitar solos. Rob, we want you to do all the high screaming stuff. We want a lot of that fast double bass stuff. And we want great melody, right? And so we worked on that record, I mean, probably like night and day for probably about 4 or 5 months. And we went into a studio called One on One Recording Studio. I'll never forget it. We had an engineer named Mike Tachi, who had just finished working, I think, 5 years doing the Metallica Black record. He was the engineer with Bob Rock. So he did pretty much all the miking, engineering, whatever. And so Metallica were loading out and we loaded in to do Victim of the System. Anyways, long story short, we finished the record, we release it in Japan, and it explodes. Does really, really well, which led us to the Answer to the Master record, which I think went gold in like a matter of 24 hours. Yeah. And that record, all of a sudden, we were selling out everything in Japan. We were playing massive venues. We were playing these things 3 nights in a row, selling this stuff out. And all of a sudden, I was on the cover of all the guitar magazines. You know, we were getting covered by the biggest metal media there. We were on TV and radio. So that's kind of Answer to the Master and Victim of the System and what it did to us, because the reason you and I are talking and we're here today is because of those 2 records.
Wow, so that's the key. You definitely cemented that with Screaming Symphony, right? So what comes to mind when you think?
Oh, I remember that. Yeah. Screaming Symphony was a very difficult record to make. It was, we were, you know, we're always trying to grow and not repeat ourselves, which is hard because, you know, I am who I am and Rob is who he is and James, etc. So it's always hard to reinvent yourself. But with Screaming Symphony, I don't think we really, there was no premeditation of let's go in this direction. It was just one of those things where Rob, I, and James would get together and we'd write music. And it seemed, the music of Screaming Symphony just seemed to naturally evolve, you know? And I remember when we were writing songs like Rat Race and Father Forgive Them, they just had this energy that was addictive. Like we'd play the song and we want to play it again. You know, it just had a really good feeling to it. And so I remember recording the record. We brought in a producer who at that time was pretty much the biggest hard rock or metal producer, named Michael Wagner. And Michael had just finished Ozzy Osbourne's No More Tears record. And then Michael did the Screaming Symphony mix with us. And I can tell you, as soon as that record was finished and got released in Japan, the band went to yet another level, which I didn't think we were going to be able to do as far as popularity. I remember I won the Burn Readers poll for Best Rock Guitarist. And the competition, I remember, was heavy. It was like Dimebag, Van Halen, all these, you know, players. So I was like, wow, how's this? This is amazing, you know, that they're acknowledging us or giving us these accolades. And Burn Magazine, for people that don't know, they're like the biggest heavy metal magazine in Japan. So I remember Screaming Symphony. Exactly. So Screaming Symphony really was one of those records that it took our career to yet another level, another high. And it gave us a lot of credibility, you know, in Japan. And all of a sudden, you know, our fan base, I mean, every time we went to Japan, it was hard for us to walk out of hotels. There were just 1,000 kids, right? But when Screaming Symphony was released, that like it just felt like everything doubled, in popularity.
What was it like to follow that up with Eye of the Hurricane? Because you had, some big charts to follow.
Oh, I can, yeah, I can tell you, you have a good collection. Wow. I can tell you that Eye of the Hurricane, it was really just an extension of doing the Screaming Symphony record. What was unique though is we flew down to Nashville, Tennessee, because Michael Wagner had moved from Los Angeles to Nashville. And I'll never forget, we were working on that record, and Michael had a studio that was on Wolf Hoffman from Accept on Wolf's farm. So I remember we were always in the studio every day with Michael, and Wolf would come in, but he'd have like overalls on because he was working on his barn, you know. And I remember he was a great guy, and I remember that was just a fun memory of that time. I remember I was, when they were mixing a record, I would go out and take Michael Wagner's bicycle and I'd go ride down these country roads, But it was the same thing. It was really an extension of Screaming Symphony. The record did very well again in Japan. You can tell what was happening. We were pretty much focused on Japan, at that time.
And then you have Crunch. What comes with Crunch on the
Yeah, I like that record a lot. I can tell you, Crunch, I was listening to a lot of Pantera. I don't know if any of the music sounds like it's influenced by Pantera, but I was listening to a lot of Pantera and I really like that edgy heaviness. What was unique on that record is we started doing a bit more detuning with the instruments. I was still, doing all the crazy shredding, soloing, and all the, the way I play, but at the same time, rhythmically, we wanted to create a wall of sound and make the record and the music bigger. And so all of a sudden, we were doing like drop D tunings or tuning the instrument whole step down, and just giving us a fatter sound, but still keeping that energy, and there's some great memories. And it was another thing where, we did that record. It was probably the defining moment where it cemented who we were in Japan, because Japan kind of knew we were evolving since the Impellitteri Black EP, Stand in Line, all the way up. But Crunch was the one where I think it just cemented our credibility. It made us that ability where we knew we were going to have a very long career there.
From what you're saying, Crunch had like a newer influence. Did that continue throughout System X?
System X, I'll tell you the truth. When I did Stand in Line with Graham Bonnet, I was never 100% happy with that record. With Stand in Line, remember, I was so young, and Graham and Chuck and Pat, they were much older than me. So I felt like I was a kid with these much older people that I loved and that were amazing musicians, but I felt somewhat intimidated, right? And so there were certain songs on Stand in Line I love. I'll always love the song, Stand in Line. I like Tonight I Fly, Leviathan. There's some really great songs that I'm very proud of. But I always vowed that someday I would do another record with Graham, but this time I was going to do it my way, right? Versus kind of being somewhat led by, people that I thought were, they were older, they were influencing me, whatever. So System X, I said, no, on this record, I'm going to do me. I'm going to write the way I want to write. I'm not going to second guess myself. If I want to do stuff that's fast or heavy or melodic, or whatever, I'm just going to do it. And I'm going to let Graham write the way he writes his lyrics and sing the way he wants, with me playing the music I want to play. And so when we did it, it really resonated with people around the world, especially when we got into some countries overseas. I think, as a matter of fact, that record, I think we finally started releasing records again in Europe. I think SPV was a label in Germany that may have released that record. And I remember the response was crazy. People really loved that record. But, I think Graham was having some issues in life, I think there's no secret that he's had an issue, I think, drinking in the past. And, I couldn't get the band off the ground with that particular lineup, which was a shame because it would have been great, to have gone back out and played live with Graham. So instead, we have a documentation of our musical collaboration for the history books, and it is a very cool record. I'm very proud of it, but that's kind of how System X, how it was created,
Did System X provide the balance that you were searching for that maybe Stand in Line lacked?
I just, look, at heart, I'm a heavy metal kid. Stand in Line reminded me much more of almost like a tribute to the band Rainbow, right? I mean, if I listen to what we started with me and Rob Rock with the Impellitteri Black EP, if you listen to songs like, Screaming Symphony, no, I'm sorry, forgive me, that's the wrong record. Let's just go back to the Impellitteri Black EP. So if you listen to songs like Lost in the Rain and Burning, those are the first two songs Impellitteri ever recorded as a band. And Rob Rock and I created a definitive sound, right? We created an identity of who we were. When I had to change singers and bring in Graham for Stand in Line, I didn't feel that I could write in that kind of really fast metal, fast speed double bass drumming and, do that kind of heavy riffage with Graham's voice, because I was used to hearing him in, again, band like Rainbow, Schenker Group, etc. So I changed my writing style for Graham and Stand in Line, which was, again, that was part of the uncomfort, right? Because I wasn't completely being myself. But with System X, right, I reverted and I did it more in a way that I was being true to myself as a musician and playing and writing the way I wanted to, but then letting Graham come in and do his part.
That makes sense.
So I think it was a horrible answer to your question. I kind of got sidetracked, but
very revealing in a way. So yeah, thank you for that.
Okay.
You continue with Pedal to the,
Mhm.
very much a heavy metal title here, and a heavy metal record too.
Yeah. Pedal to the Metal, to be honest, that was really meant to be a parody record. Are you familiar with the term parody?
Very much so.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So there's a term called parody. It's almost like you're doing a fun tribute, right? Almost in a comical way. So Rob was off still doing his own solo projects. Graham and I had disbanded the System X kind of thing. And so when I did Pedal to Metal, I wanted to do something that was a little bit more fun, a little bit more groove oriented. And it was really meant to be a very short temporary record because I knew Rob Rock was going to come to the band. So we met a singer named Curtis Skelton, who was an amazing musician, really good drummer, good singer, just a well-rounded musician. And he had just done the Ozfest tour, with his band. It was with Ozzy Osbourne and all these artists. And I remember our drummer, Glenn Sobel, introduced me to Curtis, and I said, "Oh, let's do this." So it was really meant to be a fun project. And so, we really did the music a bit more. It was catering to the times. I think, were we in well, I don't know if it was not the 90s, but it was really at this point, we were doing stuff where we're doing a lot of the detuning. We were trying to make the song sound in somewhat almost like bands like Disturbed, which I really liked, so it was it was more of a project while I was waiting for Rob to come back, and we got some really cool tunes out of that record. Propaganda Mine, I really love.
And Rob eventually did come back. You got Wicked Maiden, which it's a statement.
Yeah. Wicked Maiden, I think that's Rob's return to the band, right? And he's been in the band ever since again. So, Wicked Maiden, I think, is a celebration of the return of Rob Rock. And it kind of exudes this chemistry that Rob, I, and James have. And it was a very special record because we were writing it from our hearts. There was a lot of passion in that record, a lot of anger and edge, I love the song Wicked Maiden. It's just, there's something about it. It has a lot of power, a lot of energy. It's fun to play live. Um, and it's, you know, it's one of those records that we went back to Japan with Rob, and now we're touring again, and we're filling and selling out, you know, pretty big venues, right? And at this time also, certain places in continental Europe really started to take interest in the band again. You know, places like Spain, um, Sweden was another biggie. I remember we did the Sweden Rock Festival. I think we played on the headlining stage right before, I think it was Black Sabbath was the headliner. I think Journey was before them, and then we were before Journey. And I remember playing stuff like Iron Maiden to, I don't know, it was 20 plus thousand people, you know, and I could see the music was connecting with everyone. And so that's kind of like the memory of Wicked Maiden, of, you know, Rob Rock's return, you know, us finding again our identity, you know, as a band and as musicians, and then that music resonating really well with our fans.
That album had like a really dark feel, which you continued with Venom.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love the Venom record. The Venom record is it's definitely almost a return to the Impellitteri Black EP. You know, if you listen again to a lot of the music on that EP, there's a lot of fast double bass drum. So a lot of the music is very up tempo, very energetic. It's technically it's very hard to play. Um, and with Venom, you know, we also brought in a drummer named John Deddy, who had also played in the band Slayer, but he was I think he only did their touring. And so he actually was he was a great drummer, very aggressive player. And I thought that brought um, a unique edge, right, to that particular music for that record. And Venom was very exciting. I mean, it was the same thing. It really started to um, spread throughout the world. I remember a lot of people were contacting us from Europe. A lot of fans seemed to really start to embrace the band in Europe after we released Venom. And I like it. I think it's a very well diverse record. You know, it's got a lot of technical stuff, but at the same time, it's got some great rocking tracks, you know, like We Own the Night, which is a blast to play. It almost feels a bit like Dio, but it's still very much Impellitteri. And of course, we love Venom. You know, that's a hard song to play because of the speed of it, right? And all the technical playing you have to do. So yeah, that's Venom.
Then came The Nature of the Beast. I love this title. I think that title says it all, doesn't it?
Do you know? So we called the record The Nature of the Beast. And once it was out official, right, that we had named the record Nature of the Beast, someone goes, you know, there was a band called, and hang on, let me think about this. Oh, there was a band, I guess, in the late 70s or early 80s called April Wine.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I didn't realize, and I knew, and sad, the funny thing is, I actually knew about the band, but I honestly didn't remember or know they did a record called The Nature of the Beast. So, anyway, sorry. So, but yeah, that Nature of the Beast is kind of like the extension to Venom. You know, it's like we did the Venom record, probably spent a year and a half writing and recording the record. Then we went right to Japan. We did some touring. I think we did some dates in the United States, and I think we also did some stuff in Europe. And then we came right home and went right into the studio and started writing the next record, which was The Nature of the Beast. And it really was a continuation of Venom, same kind of direction, you know. I don't know, it came very naturally and very easy to us. And we did a couple of things that we thought were unique. Like I always loved the Phantom of the Opera, right? The movie and the whole idea of it and the play. And it was hard because so many other artists, like great artists like Nightwish, had done a version of it. But I wanted to always do more like a speed or power metal version of Phantom of the Opera with all the crazy like classical guitar soloing, you know? So we did that with Nature of the Beast, and it resonated very well with our fans.
Now that you had a chance to look at all of your albums, personally, how at what point do you feel you've reached your absolute potential?
I don't think you can. I don't think you ever reach your absolute potential, because as a human being, every day we live on this earth, we have a life experience or we learn something new. And it's the same thing when I play my guitar. I will be playing, like doing all this crazy scale stuff just to keep my hands in shape, right? And I also call it muscle memory, right? Where I don't have to think about what I'm playing. My hands just do it. But while I'm doing this, all of a sudden I'll stumble onto something. It might be technical, it might be easy, whatever. And then I'll look down and go, oh, that's really cool. And I'll like, oh, I didn't realize I could do that. Right. I didn't realize I could invert this chord, or, oh, I can play harmonic minor over this E major, F major, and play A harmonic minor, and, do this diminished piece to do so it resolves in a certain way. These are things I learn every single day. And so I don't think we're ever going to reach our peak until we're dead. Right. And the idea with this band is to play until we're dead, which could be tomorrow.
It also means the best is yet to come.
Yeah. I hope so. I mean, look, we love what we do.
Yeah. One other thing, you and Bob Rock, that's a long-lasting relationship. How would you describe your dynamic with him?
Rob and I we're good friends. I love Rob. And we met each other in 1985. And we created a band where we were writing original music for the first time in our lives. And we were playing covers, right? So we could play, all the big, popular clubs in like places like New York and Connecticut and New Jersey and Massachusetts, all these places in New England. So we grew up together playing the same type of music, learning the same cover songs, like playing Van Halen and Queen and, you name it, we played it. And what's interesting about Rob and I, why I think we work very well together as artists, because we learn from the same source. Mm-hmm. When we create music, we utilize what we learned as kids, right? As musicians, and we implement that in our songwriting. It's just natural. And so Rob and I, over the years, that writing chemistry has just strengthened. It's gotten better. As a matter of fact, when I write music now, it's a bit surreal, because when I'm playing and I come up with this really cool riff, and I'll be thinking, where am I going to go? Where's going to be the verse? Where's the chorus going to be? When I'm playing, I can actually hear what Rob is going to sing before he even sings it. Mm-hmm. So that kind of speaks volume to our relationship, right? And what we've been able to do musically, and why we've been able to create this sound that we have. It's very unique.
That makes a lot of sense. What do you think drives you to be able to do this for so long?
The guitar is an extension of who I am, right? I play music because I love music. I love playing guitar. It's not a job, right? So I think the reason we're still doing this 30 plus years later is the fact that we're passionate about this, right? This isn't about fame and fortune and blah, blah, blah. This is about doing something we love. As I said earlier, remember, my guitar is a tool that allows me to express myself emotionally. So it's very much like, if you're into painting, right? If you want to be Van Gogh or Picasso or whatever, everyone starts with a blank canvas and you express yourself. Their tool was paintbrushes, right? And paint, oil, whatever. And mine is a guitar. Rob's is his voice, right? And so I think that's the reason why we've been able to stand the test of time. You know, we've outlasted so many bands. I mean, I can't even count how many bands we knew when we first started that are long gone, you know, and yet we're still here. And I will say we do owe a huge, huge shout out and thank you to our fans in Japan. You know, we've sold millions of records in Japan, and it's because of the Japanese fans this band survived the 90s and the 2000s. It was because of that loyalty we have.
Definitely. Finally, how would you like to be remembered when it's all over and done with?
Well, I mean, as an artist,
Mhm.
I hope the music does the talking.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Mhm.
Thank you, Chris, for speaking with me and giving me all the little details behind all of your releases and the new album. And good luck with the new record.
Mark, thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it. And I apologize if I'm a little off. It's very early in the morning here, so
Oh,
but
absolutely.
thank you. I really appreciate you having me.